In the second sense, the paradigm is a single element of the whole, let's say, for instance, Newton's Principia, which, acting as a common model or an example, paradigm means just example, as you know, stands for the explicit rules and thus defines a coherent tradition of investigation. Thus, the question is for Kuhn to investigate by means of the paradigm what makes possible the constitution of what he calls a normal science, that is to say, a science which can decide if a certain problem will be considered scientific or not. And normal science does not mean at all, in this sense, a science guided by a coherent system of rules. On the contrary, the rules can be derived from the paradigms, but the paradigms can, I quote, can guide the investigation also in absence of rules. And this is precisely the second meaning of the term paradigm, which Kuhn considered the most new and profound, though it is the oldest in truth. The paradigm is, in this sense, just an example, a single phenomenon, a singularity, which can be repeated and thus acquires the capability of tacitly modeling the behavior and the practice of scientists. So I think that writing that the paradigm can guide the investigation also in absence of rule, of law, Kuhn probably refers implicitly to the Kantian doctrine of the example in the third critique, in the paragraph 18. Kant is speaking, this is the first example I make of a philosopher trying to define the example. So Kant refers to the exemplarity of the aesthetic judgment, as you remember, which needs the agreement of all men in a judgment, and that can be seen as a Beispiel, as an example of a universal rule which cannot be stated. So we have the example is the example, the Beispiel of a rule which cannot be stated. So the example, according to Kant, refers to an absent or unsayable law. So Kant seems here aware that the example does not depend from a rule or a law. The law is absent, unsayable, and yet it does not dare to free completely the example from the empire of the law, of the rule. So that's why in the Critique of Pure Reason, he writes that, I quote, "The examples are the crutches and the leading strings of a weak judgment. Of a judgment, I mean, which can only understand the universal in abstracto and is unable to decide of a concrete case, if a concrete case is covered or not by the law." So here you have the bad side of Kant. No? I think that the concept of law is really the weak point in Kant's thought. No? You remember Deleuze showing how Kant has this obsession of instituting tribunals, of trials, making the law function. So what will I try to do, on the contrary, will be to show that the logic of the example has nothing to do with the universality of the law. So but let's go back again to Foucault. It has often been observed that Foucault deliberately ignores the traditional approach to the problems of power, founded on juridical and institutional models, in order to concentrate on the analysis of the positive device, dispositif, through which power gets into the very bodies of the subjects to govern and form their forms of life. The analogy with Kuhn, again, is striking. Just as Kuhn dismisses the investigation of the rules which constitutes a normal science in order to focus on the paradigm which guide the behavior of scientists. In the same way, Foucault seems to reject the primacy of the juridical and institutional models to emphasize the techniques and the dispositif by means of which the state takes upon itself the care of the life of the individuals. So why then Foucault seems carefully to avoid carefully not only Kuhn's name, but also the term paradigm when he's reflecting on epistemological questions? Did he have some personal reason for that? As a matter of fact, in 1971, someone wrote in the New York Times Book Review an aggressive review of Les mots et les choses under the title The Mandarin of the Hour, Michel Foucault. Yeah, it was probably a very stupid enterprise, but the author was no stupid man. It was no other than George Steiner. But sometimes even intelligent men make mistakes or faux pas, and this was certainly a big mistake. Anyway, Foucault, who at the time ignored even the name of George Steiner and thought he was just a journalist, wrote an ironic and equally aggressive answer. George Steiner wrote in his turn a reply, which was followed by an even more ironic response by Foucault. Foucault writes, Michel Steiner me fait savoir à présent qu'il est professeur d'université. Cela augmente de beaucoup mon amusement. Il reste qu'il va me falloir maintenant augmenter mon indulgence dans une proportion au moins égale. So, the problem is that in his reply, George Steiner accused Foucault of not having quoted Kuhn's name in his book. And Foucault explained that he read Kuhn's book in the winter 63-64 after, as I told, having written the book, Les mots et les choses. And then he adds, Je n'ai donc pas cité Kuhn, mais l'historien des sciences qui a façonné et inspiré sa pensée, Georges Canguilhem. This is a very surprising statement because, though Kuhn, in the preface of his book, acknowledged his debt to two French epistemologians, Coiré and Meyerson, he never mentions Canguilhem in his book. So perhaps, it's just an hypothesis, it is possible that Foucault, who was closely linked to Canguilhem, avoiding any reference to Kuhn's name, was simply paying him back for his impoliteness. But though Foucault was certainly sensible to personal and friendly motivations, it is evident that the reason for his silence could not be only of this kind. So let us then have a closer look at the way and the paradigm functions in Foucault's work.